thank you very much for joining me. Just a brief introduction. My name's Amanda Morel. I'm with Simplicity KiwiSaver. Now, here's a quiz for you. Anybody heard of Simplicity in this room? Good. Were you guys aware that Spark had made us a preferred provider at all? No? Does anybody know what that means? No. Okay. So I'll just give you a brief history and then we'll launch into the 101, Money 101. Simplicity launched just over a year ago. We call ourselves an industry disruptor. We are a nonprofit. We still make you money. KiwiSaver just means we're not concerned with buying ourselves mansions and fancy cars, etc. Our founder, Sam Stubbs, already made his fortune. So like a lot of people in that position, they decided to give back, and this was his way of giving back. He had a lot of expertise in the KiwiSaver area, formerly with Tower. We bumped paths several years ago. I was the personal finance editor for Interest.co. Does anybody have ever heard of Interest.co? We're all concerned there about watching, saving your money, the cost of borrowing, etc. So we had a commonality, an interest in money. We've developed a small team. There's only 6 of us, one part-timer. And believe it or not, the 6 of us, with the help of 49 volunteers, have already attracted 10,000 members, or we're just kicking up towards 10,000 members, and we're managing close to $300 million of people's money. We're also in Spark choosing us as a preferred provider. It means anybody who's coming into KiwiSaver for the first time, starting a new job, they're very confused about KiwiSaver, as a lot of people still are 10 years on. It means they're automatically enrolled into Simplicity. The reasons for doing that, like many other of our corporates who have chosen us, including Meridian and Genesis and Somerset and Vista, they see it as a benefit to their employees, that they're going to help their employees be better off because of the savings and fees. As a nonprofit, we've reduced the fees on managing your money as low as we possibly can. We're basically providing it to you for the cost that we deliver it, barring our own expenses, which are quite moderate because we're not paying ourselves big fat salaries. We're working for you. So that's just a little history of Simplicity. Any idea how much money is in KiwiSaver? Hands up, and I've got a free book. I also wrote a book on personal finance a few years ago. Anybody have an idea? Just a close proximity to how much money is currently in KiwiSaver? Take a wild random guess.
8 billion.
8? 10? 42 billion. 42. Who said that? I think he was just being shy. So come get a book from me when you're done. So $42 billion, it's a very lucrative industry for fund managers, not for us. So in reducing our costs, we're trying to save you money. With the average savings for people is about $65,000, a lot more in some cases, because you'll see later on when I do a fee comparison how dramatic the fee differences are. And also just another pop quiz here. Any idea how much your balance is in KiwiSaver right now? Anybody know how much their balance is? Oh, good, quite a few of you. I don't have that many bucks. Anybody know what they pay in fees?
Yeah.
How much?
$3 every month account fee plus around, depending on the fund.
Yeah.
So I'm paying around $19 to $20 on my fund right now.
Per month?
Per month.
Per month. Oh, good. You're the exception. A lot of people don't realize, they still realize that they think that there's one fee, an annual fee in KiwiSaver, so they think, oh, they're managing my lifetime savings for $24 or whatever it is. Actually, there's a whole other level of fees that people still don't understand, something called the management expense ratio. That's a tally of all the different fees. Trustees' fees, supervisor fees, administration fees, expensive salaries for fancy offices and for fund managers, they're all bundled up together. That's expressed as a percentage point. That, whatever it is for you, comes out of your KiwiSaver balance every year. That's the big one, the number to watch, because over 40 years of working or however long you're going to be working, at the end of the day, probably about 20% of your lifetime savings is going to go back to your fund manager. So people get really intimidated, scared by fees because they think it's a bit too confusing that they all charge us the same. Somebody said to me, oh, all the banks are the same. Well, they're not, actually. The fees are hugely variable out there. So it's next year, the FMA has changed the rules to make this more accessible for people. They're forcing providers to express in dollar terms how much they're paying, which is a really smart thing to do, because otherwise it's very difficult to know. Even if you had that percentage point, it would be out of context unless you knew against the other people out there, whether it was high or low. So we're half the industry average in our fees. So let's get to money, the reason why you guys came here. So I called this the stupidest things people do with their money. So let's go to the most intelligent man, or one of the most intelligent men. He said, 2 things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not so sure about the universe. So I don't mean to insult you guys, but actually the process of accumulating wealth is actually not very difficult. It comes down to understanding knowledge and willpower. So I thought I'd review sort of the top 10 money mistakes, because people think about like there's a big secret to getting rich. It's actually they're just repetitively repeating bad habits in their life that put them in a worse position. Living beyond your means, spending all your pay and saving nothing. And I meet so many people who say, I just feel like I'm on a treadmill. And it's easy to feel like that in Auckland when you're paying off your mortgage on a $1, $2, $3 million mortgage. But everything that comes in basically goes out. You have no provision for setting aside your savings, which is why KiwiSaver is considered to be a mechanism to save yourself from yourself, because it comes right off the top, goes into before you see it. You adjust your spending, and I'm sure you all know that. You know, you've been maybe out of work for a period of time in your life. Somehow we adjust. Yeah, we just scale down our lifetime. Most people who are on that vicious cycle of never getting ahead have no provision for saving. They're just spending without a care. So being a consumer, same thing. Overspending on stuff you don't need, which loses value. I think for a lot of people, and you've obviously, a light has switched, you're here, you want to learn more about money. People walk through life and they buy stuff. It makes them temporarily feel good. They fill emotional voids. You get that temporary high, and like bubble gum, you know, this nice sweet little taste in your mouth, it's gone, and then you're left with a bunch of junk. I've certainly had that experience, and you know, things like, I don't know, everybody's got their weakness, whatever, shoes for women and handbags, they sit there, and you know, however much $1,000 you spent, just money down the drain, they depreciate. One of the things they say that separates the middle class from the wealthy is that the wealthy invest and they save their money, while the middle class just consumes. And you look around at the shopping mall, you'll see everybody walking around like zombies. They're stuck in the middle class of consumer highs, lows. Paying unnecessary interest on interest charging debt. We'll get into this in a bit on credit cards. Again, just like fees, I would argue fees are a little bit more confusing because not many people tell you the straight up thing on fees. But you know, you do get on your in your credit card statements the interest that you're being charged. Pay attention to that. There's no reason on earth you should be paying 20% interest on credit cards. And then you think about those loan sharks out there, they're charging twice that. You default on the payment. The next thing you know, you've charged 300%. So those are the people that are in really bad way because they're just desperate and they don't understand how it works. Not understanding your cash flow. I know it's very easy with families or working life, et cetera, not to figure out. You're stuck in that mode of just spending everything that you're getting in. But it's really important to sit down periodically, do the review. Amazingly, we get the most signups on Sunday evening. I think that's sort of the witching hour when people are like, oh, shit, you know, what about my retirement? They sign up and they're trying to get their things sorted. Allocate one day of the week to doing, or one day of the month even, start like that. You'll find that the more you turn your mind towards money, the more you're going to start to care, and that filters across the whole level of things like spending, looking at your statements, shopping around for better insurance rates, better mortgages, it penetrates your whole way of thinking. Putting off retirement saving when the time is on your side and missing out on compound interest. The thing, you know, now is the time to start saving. Actually, if you could have talked to yourself right out of university before they give you your first credit card, talk to your kids about it, get them educated about it, get them saving. It makes such a massive difference. You can't even make up for the difference in increased exponential savings at age 40 to 60 compared to if you'd started at 20. Compound interest is your friend. So going now to the next 5, not using KiwiSaver effectively, paying too much in fees, not contributing enough. A lot of people, probably you know, what's the minimum contribution rate? Hands up. 3. Do you know what the maximum is?
8.
Anybody paying 8? Oh, well done. Excellent. So that is going to stand you very well as in the long term. And it's the effect of the higher contribution rates, lower fees, regular savings, because regular savings, it's not like it's just coming in one time at the end of the year. As you pay that monthly contribution, you're gaining interest on that, your savings are growing, it's invested. Not having any savings goals, or any goals at all. I'm a goal junkie, I'm always setting new goals. They work incredibly well. It may sound like a cliche, I know, but if you don't have a goal, you're going to be in that perpetual cycle of wandering and drifting around as well. Set goals for yourself. It's remarkable how the subconscious mind will reset, and you'll start operating around to achieving those goals, whether they're career, relationships, money. Write them down and work towards it. Most people, I think, don't know what they want in life, and they wonder, or they have little wake-up moments where they do a reset. Feeling invincible, no rainy day savings, that's really important because we all know that the car breaks down, the washing machine, whatever, they all tend to go at the same time. If you don't have a provision for that and you end up having to borrow money to pay for all that, you're back on that cycle of just repaying interest and not being able to make any money on your savings. You want interest and compound interest working in your favor, not against you. Paying your debt till tomorrow. It's don't put off today till tomorrow what you could do today. If you've got the money available, and it's an interesting psychology. I mean, I even find it myself. Like you've got the money available, but you have a very hard time pushing the button to pay those bills or to put in the minimum contribution rate to get the member tax credit. Last year, over 1 million people in KiwiSaver didn't collect money that was on the table for free from the government. Remarkable, isn't it? $500, if you saw it there lying on the floor, would you step over it and forget about it? But I don't know, people find it too painful to pay off things that are actually going to make a huge difference in their life. And then finally, buying cheap stuff that breaks down. You could kind of get ridiculous about being thrifty and trying to save money, and and you've all had this experience, I'm sure, buying cheap stuff that breaks down, even cars or whatever, and then you just, I think now the average shelf life is about 5 years for a lot of things. If you buy smartly, you just buy once. Okay, so credit card debt. I had to help my son out for this assignment. Actually, this slide is not correct. Sorry, somebody was revising this for me. It says Kiwis have over $6 billion of credit card debt. Somebody that's got the actual number from last year, 2016. Anybody have a random guess how much Kiwis put on credit cards? $36 billion was put on credit cards on the plastic last year. 22, but I know there's some really smart people in the room. I just don't even have a credit card because I forget, I know that it's there, but I just don't want to know about it. I don't want to forget. But 22% of that $36 billion was interest bearing, which is a lot of money to be paying at average rates of 19% on those credit cards, which is pretty scary, really. So I advocate, I know they're useful for booking flights and stuff that you need, like a MasterCard or Visa card, but those debit credit cards, does anybody use those? Are brilliant as well because you're forced to just buy things that you've saved your money for. So a good idea just to get out of the credit card danger because it's like giving people a loaded gun, really. The banks are very happy to give you a loaded gun, but really it's just pointed at yourself. All right, so 7 hard truths about credit cards. It's wealth destroying or wealth retarding. As long as you're paying interest, you're not earning it. Yeah, so again, you want compound interest working in your favor, not against you. Risky, that debt has to be repaid, so even if misfortune or illness means you lose your income, you're still liable for that. Also, did you know that your unpaid credit card debts can be sold? I'm sure you guys don't have this problem, but you default on your payments long enough, it's put through to those shark collectors. They add on more money to reclaim that debt and hound you endlessly until it's repaid, and they're merciless. So don't get into that problem. It's not priced for you. This is the other thing that annoys me about credit cards. If you're a really good person, you pay off your bills on time, you don't default on anything, why should you pay 20% on money that you borrow? You're not rewarded. No one's rewarded for good behavior with the banks and credit cards. You all kind of get hit with the same thing. This is why the banks in New Zealand are among the most profitable in the world because of our housing issue as well. It inflates your costs. Credit card debt means you pay more for things and even more with credit card repayment and insurance. And in just a moment, we're going to look at some scenarios where you pay the minimum and how long it actually takes on minimum repayments. Having consumer debt reduces your ability to borrow for things that you really need, like a house, and it's stressful to be in debt. Did you know that debt and money is the single leading cause of divorce, higher than infidelity? And I'm sure you've all experienced that. It's not healthy for your relationship to be under duress with money, and that's a big problem these days in New Zealand. So stupidity is minimum repayments. So here's some examples. And if you want to check out these numbers or see how much your credit card debt is costing you, Interest.co has some amazing resources, and I just scalped this from them. But if you spend $2,000 with ANZ or Westpac on a standard Visa MasterCard and pay off at the minimum repayment, it will take 16 years or longer to pay that off, which is ridiculous. And you'll end up paying twice for that money. With BNZ, and this just goes to show you got to shop around. Interest is really good at showing you the comparative differences, and they're always changing. It will take you 20 years with BNZ because their minimum repayment is different. It's lower, $7,000. ASB takes 14 years, 10 months, $4,000. Kiwi Bank, 7 years and 7 months. So it's their minimum repayments are a little bit higher. And TSB of a rate of 7 years, similar to Kiwi Bank. Quite interesting, isn't it? The minimum repayment. That, again, in North America, and I think New Zealand is doing the same thing, they're forcing now, because they realize, it's leading behavior when you highlight the minimum balance. Your mind just is drawn to that number and you automatically repay it. Now they're going to shift how they produce those statements so you can see, like in KiwiSaver, your dollar fees, how much borrowing that money at minimum repayments is going to cost you, because it's, you open your credit card statement, it's the fine print, 3 pages in. That's where the important stuff is buried. So that's credit cards. I mentioned at my final point about credit cards is that there's a liability there that exists when you've got joint assets. So I call it relationship risk. This applies to credit cards or all your sort of joint assets. Sexually transmitted debt. So with your credit cards, in the event that you break up, and I write about this in my book as well, make sure you unshackle yourself from your partner, because if they go on a big revenge spending splurge on their credit card, you're responsible for that too. So it's important, I know it sounds really mundane, but in those kind of events, to just make sure you handle your affairs, your financial affairs correctly, so that you're not hit up with some unnecessary pain there. And also, this isn't a big deal. It's a very controversial thing, but the reality is a lot of relationships break up. So consider when you're coming into a relationship, if in the unlikely event of, how's it going to impact you? How are you going to feel if your assets are halved? A lot of financial planners write about this too. Ring fencing is one way to protect, putting trust, but even those are not impenetrable. Or prenuptial agreements. Anyhow, I'm not trying to cast any dispersions about your relationship, but just be smart and be realistic, because it's painful when that happens financially as well. So Calvin Coolidge, he was the 30th president of the United States, talks about wisdom in your financial affairs, living within your means. There is no dignity quite so impressive and no independence quite so important as living within your means. I know it doesn't sound as sexy as being whatever, the tech entrepreneur, those dreams, but actually making do with what you have is going to be hugely powerful for your financial outcomes as well. A lot of people, and you see them lined up buying lottery cards every week, shelling out the money, hoping, praying that that's going to be their, it happens to, you're better chance of being struck by lightning. So just look and deal with what you have, and you make some adjustments. Practical ways to live below your means. Review all your expenses. Switch to lower cost telcos. They're getting way more competitive these days. If you're trapped in a subscription-based service, sorry, I guess I shouldn't say that. Stay loyal to your employer. I'm sure they give you an amazing discount. KiwiSaver, safe territory. Get rid of stuff you don't use. I have 2 small children. I've been lecturing them, they're not so small actually, teenagers, about money. Everything's going on Trade Me these days. They're loving it because they're making money for stuff that's just sitting around the house. It not only teaches them that you got to work to earn your money instead of mom handing out allowance. It doesn't happen in my house. So get creative, look at your own things and how you can either make more money using your own assets or get rid of stuff you don't need. Automate your savings. This is how KiwiSaver works. If you have other private savings, go for it. You'll find your lifestyle expenses just adjust. You might not party quite so much, or clothing, or more modest holidays. You do figure out a way to adjust. Buy only what you can afford. I say, like, I'm an advocate for those debit credit cards because it just forces me to live within my means. I'm very happy with that. I don't feel like my lifestyle has been impaired at all by not being able to put out all that money on credit cards. I don't know if it happens here. I've been living here for 10 years now. If you're curious, I'm Canadian, not American. But just before I left Canada, pre-GFC, I swear to God, every week the banks were calling, trying to force on me another credit card, thus upping my limit. I'm like, I don't want $30,000 on my credit card. I don't need to spend that money, but they want you to spend. So I call them financial vampires. Don't fall victim to a financial vampire. Put 50% of all savings, all raises towards savings. I don't know how often that happens anymore, but if you do get a bonus, the spark is feeling really, flush. Before you blow it all on a holiday, consider spending half. It's another lesson I teach my kids now when they get the trade me win. I'm like, put half of it aside. And it's just getting into that mindset. Fast track your mortgage repayments. There's no better return on investment than paying down your mortgage as quickly as humanly possible. Use the calculators on interest.co, compare. This is a very effective way of getting into that position of not interest working against you, where you're forever paying off the principal and interest, but having interest working in your favor. And I can't understate that enough because I'm sure a lot of you are homeowners in this room. How many? Yeah. So you get that monkey off your back and you're sailing. All right, so back to Einstein. He called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. Save early, save often. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. So 1%, you remember that whole protest worldwide, 1%? Well, 1% in your KiwiSaver, here's just an example of how powerful compound interest is. For a 20-year-old earning $40,000 a year, to increase their personal contributions, their employer would have to as well, from 3 to 4. That adds up to a lifetime difference in savings of $82,000. And again, 1% out of your paycheck is, I think, an extra, if you're on that salary, an extra $4 a week. You're not going to notice it, right? It's another coffee. But you sure as heck, I think, notice an extra $82,000 in your bank account. That's a lot of holidays to visit your grandkids over in Australia or wherever they should be. So I'm going to go over this really quickly because I feel like I've been talking for a long time without a break. You guys are all still awake, listening? So KiwiSaver, and I mentioned that figure is a little out of date. The one on the right, it says it's a 38 billion pool. Now it's 42. But look at by 2030, it's going to be 200 billion. Yeah. So you can imagine how much profit there is to be made. Last year, fund managers drew $380 million in fees. So you want to have the lowest fee possible. It's your retirement savings. Financial vampires, what you don't know will hurt you. A lot of people are still really in the dark about the price of everything from your real cost of your mortgage, the principal and interest, and KiwiSaver, anything else they're paying for fees. So I might skip through this. Well, just briefly, we call it the most expensive household expense you didn't know about it. If you relate it to your power bills, mobile phone charges, we have over a lifetime $35,000, close to $36,000. KiwiSaver fees will cost you all up about $54,000, but there's a huge range. If we have time, I'll show you quickly the difference between some of the providers on an annualized basis. It's remarkable. Power bills, more about $37,000 a year. So big, important. You want to know what you're paying. This is just a little chart here showing the average fees and the amount on retirement. So Simplicity's fees, $19,000 over lifetime, with a savings of $35,000, and that extrapolates out onto retirement, a savings of $65,000. Oops, here we go. Lowest fees. I think you get the point on fees, but I would be happy to answer any questions on fees now while we're going through it, if anybody's got a quick question. So keep going there. So this is an important thing to understand. And there's a brilliant, anybody listen to Freakonomics? It's a great book. There's a Freakonomics. I recommend it. It's very entertaining, well produced. They have an item called, you go to iTunes or whatever, download it, it's all free. The stupidest thing people do with their money. Their number one thing is paying too much in fees, and they have a whole item on passive investing. So one of the reasons why we can save you money in KiwiSaver Simplicity anyhow is we use a style of investment called passive. We just invest in the index. We use Vanguard, so we're not active managers. They're active managers, and they're the hot shots in the industry. You pay them a lot of money. They're choosing and picking stocks. They're moving in and out of stocks. There's brokerage fees you pay on that, the management expense fees on paying those people. So by just investing in the index and passive funds, they're much lower cost. And again, we use Vanguard. Vanguard, anybody heard of them? Yep, they manage about $4 trillion worth of money. They're also nonprofit, and people are piling into them like there's no tomorrow, because they're turning on to the fact that they've been getting gouged. People have been left in the dark way too long about the cost of investing. And there's explanation here, higher fees, picking winner and losers, higher costs, shiny offices, it goes on, right? So in our model, virtual business, we're all online, so we don't, although I'm quite envious of your wonderful building here, we don't have a big building. We don't have commissions. Everything goes back to our members. So findings from around the world, just quickly on active versus passive managers. In Australia, over the last 5 years, active share markets failed to beat the index 69% of the time. In Europe, over 10 years, active managers failed to beat the index 74 to 98% of the time. And in the US, over 10 years, they failed 78 to 95% of the time. You guys have heard of Warren Buffett? Yeah, did you read about that bet he made 10 years ago? He bet any hedge fund manager, these are active managers, that they could outperform the S&P 500. He put $500,000 on the table, so did the other fellow. The other fellow, it's got 6 months, or actually a few months left to go, he folded and said, there's no way I can beat you. That he was about 8% or 8 basis points below what the S&P 500 produced. So the smartest, cleverest guys in the room, they can't outperform the stock market over long periods of term. So that's why just investing in chunks of the market, you buy a slice of the companies that are on the various, like the NZX, S&P 500, wherever, one in Australia, and that'll do you well over the long course. So big picture, folks, I'll wrap it up and take some questions. KiwiSaver, just one piece of the puzzle. Your single greatest asset is you, ultimately. So if you earn $51,000 median income in New Zealand, you'll earn more than $2 million. So you're all going to be millionaires. It's what you do with that money that will really stand you in a good place financially or a poor financial position over time. And your spending decisions will impact that. So it's all those things that it's not any great magic single bullet solution out there. It's your daily habits. It's having plans and goals, controlling your spending and not getting gouged by financial vampires. Last take-home message is knowledge is money. Understand your habits and yourself. Pay yourself first. That's one of the easiest, smartest things you can do. Don't get into debt at a young age. Please teach all your kids to make wise choices from a young age, because they model. How many parents in the room? They're like little monkeys. They just follow what you do. So teach them well. And knowing the difference between needs and wants, I'd say, is a really big one. And next time you're at the shopping mall, look around all the people walking around like zombies. And one of my favorite heroes, the Dalai Lama at Health, is true wealth. So he was asked what, and actually I'll read this quote, it's in my book. He was asked on one occasion what he found most surprising about human behavior. And this was his response. Man, because he sacrifices his health in order to make money, and then he sacrifices his money to recuperate his health. And then he is so anxious about the future, and he does not enjoy the present, the result being that he does not live in the present or in the future. He lives as if he's never going to die, and then dies having never really lived. So that's a powerful message, I think. So take it lightly, but make smart choices and really, value those things that don't cost money. Your health is one of them. Thank you very much, guys. You've been very patient. I know a lot of that stuff you probably already know. Hopefully a bit of a reminder or a refresh, and you can go home or or pick one day of the week and have a review of your own finances. I'd like to open it up for questions if there's anybody. Yeah?
Hey, I might have missed this, but
Yeah.
you're a not-for-profit, so what's the benefit for Simplicity?
Well, the benefit is that we're helping make New Zealanders a hell of a lot wealthier. We do get paid salaries, so we're not all volunteers, but we do have 46 volunteers, lawyers, PR experts. Most of our members are our strongest advocates for us. So we're a social entrepreneur type of organization. The other aspect of this, our structure, which you might find interesting, is that we do have there is a differential between what we pay Vanguard and pay to kind of manage our very bare bones business, but we do donate that to charities. So 15% of all of our management revenue is pooled and gets donated to charity. So far we've donated over $100,000 to charity. We've got this really cool dashboard you can see here. And so, whoops, can that scroll down here? Oops, there's our members. It's a bit higher than what you see because anyhow, there's thing being in process. But so the annual donations to charity, over 120,000. All right, well, thank you very much. Now, I've kind of forgotten I know one guy over here has a book. Anybody else, if you're interested, maybe a fun type, I've got 4 extra copies here. I was approached by Penguin Random House to write a book about money when I was working for Interest. And so I poured all my collective wisdom on everything we've discussed here today. It's really well referenced. It was done before I joined Simplicity. It's had really good reviews, so you're most welcome. I'll leave 4 extra copies here, or come up and chat with me and I'll hand one out. Thank you very much, and you guys have been awesome.